For today's Avatar review, we're taking a look at the final episodes of Season 1, The Siege of the North Parts 1 and 2, which I agonized over whether or not to do these as one video, but I think we'll be fine. There's a lot of action stuff in here, and action stuff is hard to review. It really only takes, like, one of two sentences. Either the action was good or the action wasn't good, right? Fortunately, that doesn't mean there's nothing for us to talk about here. There's a lot of other stuff in these episodes, too. In fact, the amount of stuff in these two episodes is up there with some of the more crowded individual episodes of the show. And even though I still feel like there are some pacing issues here, like the show still hasn't quite reached the level of good pacing that it'll be known for most of the rest of the series, just giving this many ideas one extra episode to breathe, even if a big chunk of the total time of that extra episode was filled up with action stuff, it really makes a difference. But there is a lot here, and I'm going to go over some of the stuff that is established here, just to start off the review so that we can really dig into it later. And like, even if some of this stuff was mentioned previously, I don't really remember if it was or not, this is where it's really established. This is where the show really starts to treat these things like real lore or overarching plot points. Iroh's legendary failure at Ba Sing Se is mentioned here. His lost son is mentioned here when he outright says that he thinks of Zuko as his own now. The concept of the moon being the source of waterbending is established here, as well as more lore about the spirits and the idea that some of the more ancient spirits have migrated to the physical world for one reason or another. And a new status quo is established with them showing us right at the start of the episode that with a proper master to help her hammer out the details and relearn the stuff that she had to teach herself, probably incorrectly in a lot of areas, Katara is an extremely fast learner when it comes to waterbending, which is always apparent because she was so good already while being self-taught. And in this episode, she's even named a master. By the end of this, Aang, he's better at his waterbending, but he's not mastered it yet. And by the end of the episodes, Pakku has named her his new master. Which is, like, he's come so far. We also have the library, the ancient underground sunken library that we're going to see in a later episode mentioned here. We even get to see a flashback clip of its interior. And this is the episode where, finally, things go so far that Iroh, who has been trying to stay out of the world's affairs for quite a while at this point, has no choice but to step up and actually take action, becoming the character that we know him to be for the rest of the series. He's been wise, he's been kind up to this point, but by the end of the show, he's a hero. And that's not who he was yet until that point, until that moment. But we'll talk about that in a minute. At the start of this episode, between Katara showing such drastic improvement in her waterbending, and seeing the chemistry and the rapport that's built between Sokka and Princess Yue, it's clear that there's been a time skip. I don't recall if they tell us exactly how long a time skip it's been, but it doesn't matter. Enough time has passed for these things to happen. And while I wish that we had gotten to see that stuff happen, rather than just jumping to after it had, they do a good enough job of showing us the culmination of all those things that happen that we don't need to see them. It's just a wish that I have. It's not really necessary. And I find it absolutely hysterical that in that early establishing scene of Katara taking on other waterbenders, really showing off how much she's progressed, when we see Aang goofing off with his waterbending, she seems just as miffed with him as Pakku. Like, she and Pakku have built a real rapport. It's actually quite adorable. You also kind of get the sense throughout this episode that, for a while at least, Yue was trying to have a relationship with Sokka while not severing her betrothal with random guy. We meet him in this episode, but I do not remember his name. There's a couple of funny gags around him, but he's just such a non-character. He's the typical jerk that the character is betrothed to. There's not much more depth to him than that. Because eventually she does break off her friendship with Sokka even. Meaning that at some point, either she was denying that it might turn into something more, or she intended it to turn into something more and it just didn't. Like, they don't get explicit with any of it, but that's a really complex subject matter for a kid's show. And it's one of the main reasons I wish we had gotten to see more of this interim period that we skip over, because we would have gotten more of that. Like, she mentions her duty to her people, and politics are mentioned by various parties around this betrothal throughout the episode. I would have liked to have seen more of those politics. Yeah, I can understand why they might have thought that might be too much for a child audience. We're getting dangerously close to, like, Game of Thrones material here at this point. But what's more interesting is you even get the sense after Sokka joins up with a dangerous raiding party and is then taken off of it by the chief to be put on protection duty over Yue instead of her betrothed, that even he's hoping that something will happen. Like, this political marriage has to happen, but, you know, he'd be cool if the two of them had a thing on the side. Which is just weird. It's just weird. It's a weird concept to explore in a kid's show, but that really is the vibe you get from him here. Otherwise, why would he have picked Sokka instead of the person that she was supposed to marry to protect her? And then send the person she was supposed to marry off on a mission where he might die and may have died. Do we see him again after he attacks Zhao and Zhao casually throws him off the ship into the ocean? I don't remember if we do. We certainly don't see him even after Yue has died, which is the thing that happened in this episode, spoiler alert. Did he even matter? I don't know, but it's interesting. The whole situation is interesting. I feel like I could make an entire video just talking about it. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this? Am I reading too much into this or not? The stuff with Sokka and Yue, though, is definitely one of the main emotional through lines of this episode. Whereas the other one is Aang realizing how hopeless the situation is. There's a fantastic scene where, as Fire Nation ships are rolling up on the Northern Water Tribe to lay siege to it, Aang goes out and starts taking them out, using some of the same antics we've seen him use to defeat Fire Nation weapons and technology throughout the show so far. And we see how much it takes. It's definitely doable to take down one of these ships, but it takes a lot, and even then, some waterbenders from the tribe have to kind of swoop in at the end for an alley-oop. And then he flies up on Appa and gets a look at the entire fleet. And it just goes on forever. There are so many ships. Zhao is obsessed with taking the Northern Water Tribe and cementing himself as a legend, to the point that he intends to kill the moon to cut off the ability of the waterbenders to use their bending, making this conquest more easy for him. And so he has used all of his influence and all of his privileges of rank to assemble a force the likes that we have never seen before. And we cut later to Aang returning after taking down several more ships. And it's not nearly enough, and he's given up hope he can't do this himself. And everyone has expected him to, because he's the Avatar. And it's such a strong scene because he's not having fun anymore, right? He's lost all of that childish vigor. And they get an idea soon after of how he might make more of a difference. But for that brief moment, the full weight of what it means to be the Avatar, of that expectation placed on him because of what he is apparent. And they do a really good job of conveying it, even though they move on from it pretty quickly. And like, yeah, if he were a more fully realized avatar, maybe it wouldn't have been so hopeless, but he's still just one person. He's still just one person with the weight of the entire world on his back. And season 1 hasn't given us many moments where he gets to feel that. This is one of the few where he does. There's also a subplot of Iroh helping Zuko, who, remember, the Fire Nation thinks he's dead at this point, sneak into the North Pole so he can capture the Avatar before Zhao gets there and manages to do it himself. And this culminates with Yue taking Aang to the Spirit Oasis, the place where all the spiritual energy in the North Pole culminates, so he can try to enter the spirit world and look for help. And this is where we get a really good look at the spirit world again, or for the first time. It's the first time we really see what it's like there. The kind of environment there. It's creepy as all hell. There's weird creatures everywhere. All of them look like real-world animals or twisted versions thereof. It's nothing like the spirit world we see later in Korra, which is one of my main issues with Korra, is that it kind of shats is probably too strong a word. It ignores its own continuity. It ignores the continuity of the franchise for the sake of its own storytelling a lot. And the lore around the spirit world is one of the places where it does that most egregiously. But here it is unsettling, and yet still magnificent and still majestic, and still a place that it seems like it would be super interesting for the show to explore more. But while Aang is meditating and he's left his body to explore the spirit world and try to find help, Zuko shows up to take him. This is after we've got an exposition that the moon makes waterbending stronger, and since it's still nighttime, obviously that means that Katara is able to defend Aang until the sun comes up and Zuko becomes stronger. He takes Aang, and this leads to a fantastic scene where, while they're hiding in an ice cave to protect themselves from the elements, knowing that Aang is unconscious, Zuko just unloads on him. He mentions his sister and how she was a prodigy, and how he's had to fight for everything, but that's made him stronger. And it's the kind of stuff that, like, this is such good foreshadowing, because obviously he's just unloading it on Aang because he knows Aang can't hear him and see his weakness, right? But this is the kind of stuff that the two characters will at some point in the show be close enough that they would confide this kind of stuff in each other anyway. It's a great character moment for Zuko because it allows us to see him in a vulnerable state too, as the other protagonist of the show, the other main protagonist of the show, without really undermining who he is at this point. It's very strong. Throughout all this, though, Aang learns where the moon spirit is, and he almost gets back in time to save Zhao from killing it. Zhao has now made landfall. He's reached the spirit oasis, and he has the moon spirit, a koi fish, in his bag, ready to burn it away. And Iroh stands up to him, absolutely terrifies Zhao when, after he does kill the spirit, he takes down 4 of Zhao's guys in like a second. Like, you can see the smug look on Zhao's face turn to pure horror as he runs for his life. Iroh really is in top form here, and it's really fantastic. But the moon is dead, which means waterbending is dead, which means the Northern Water Tribe is defenseless now, even in the dead of night. And this pisses Aang off. Like, he enters the Avatar state. We know he really only does that at this point when he's really overflowing with negative emotions. And he merges with the ocean spirit, the like I don't know if it's like if they were like together romantically, but like the partner to the moon spirit. And waterbending may be dead at this point, but as the ocean spirit, he has like physical control over all the waters of the ocean. So he's able to use his waterbending to drive this giant ocean spirit koi fish energy mech thing out into the ocean and just start wailing on Fire Nation guys, wiping out any Fire Nation guys they run into on their way out of the city. And it's kind of horrifying, but awesome at the same time. Like, yeah, you get the feeling that he's really channeling more the ocean spirit's rage here than he is doing this himself, but Aang still, he kills a lot of people here. And maybe it was necessary, and maybe they deserved it. But it's still one of the most raw and horrifying things we see in this show. Like Iroh said it earlier in the episode, that the spirits aren't to be messed with or something to that degree. And he was definitely right, because the wrath of one of these spirits, it's shocking. And the spirit's wrath is only quelled in time to spare the lives of all of the other soldiers out in those further ships. When Yue, who, again, a thing that was established in this episode, it was established that she was given life after she died as a young child by the moon spirit. She's able to give that life back, sacrificing herself to resurrect the moon, becoming an avatar of the moon spirit herself. Not in the, like, Aang avatar kind of way, but in the more traditional, she's like a projection of it kind of way. You know what I mean? And when the ocean spirit sees that, it returns to the oasis to be with the other koi. And, like, yeah, the Fire Nation are the bad guys, but, like, thank God that happened. Because that would have been, like, I don't know, how many guys were on those ships? Hundreds? Thousands? Of more deaths on Aang's conscience going forward. Like, I'm glad for the guy that didn't happen, right? There's also kind of an undercurrent of mercy in these episodes. Like, we see that water is very deadly in this, and yet we see Katara's fighting style is all about, like, incapacitating people, holding them in place, right? It's a really stark contrast to what we see with the ocean spirit later. And then you have, like, in this scene, Sokka is my frickin' spirit animal, because he reacts probably how I would have in the situation.
We can't just leave him here.
Sure we can. Let's go.
No. If we leave him, he'll die.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's bring the guy who's constantly trying to kill us.
But after Aang is recovered, after Zuko takes him, Zuko is left unconscious in the snow in a blizzard, and Aang has enough mercy in his heart to save him, which is, good. It's a good thing going forward that he's still alive. And as Zuko is fighting Zhao, when the last act of terrible, terrible murder that the ocean spirit partakes in on its way back to the oasis is to grab Zhao and try to carry him to the depths to get him back for what he did, Zuko tries to save him, and it's only Zhao's pride that keeps him from doing that. There's like I said, there's so much here, but stuff like that, like they're really starting to get it. They're really starting to get how to convey this stuff well. It's just a couple of gestures and looks between these two characters. Like, there's a little bit of voice acting there where Zuko calls out for him, but that's it. And it tells us all these things about the characters. Zhao could have lived, maybe. Maybe Zuko could have gotten him out of there, but he doesn't even try. He thinks so much of himself and so little of Zuko that he doesn't even try to live. That tells you more about him than 90% of his dialogue scenes in this entire season of the show. And the episode ends, of course, with everybody getting ready to move on. The siege is over. The Fire Nation has retreated. They're getting ready to move on, and Pakku's even going to head down to the southern tribe with some other waterbenders to help them try to get their shit together. Which is such a cool idea and leads to a silly one-off line later on, but considering that I do like these characters, one that I'm happy is there, but we'll, I'm sure, talk about that when the time comes. This is a pair of great episodes. There's fantastic character stuff throughout for everybody. Katara's is probably most in the background of anybody's, but like, we get to see how much of a badass she's become, and she just got a character focus episode the week prior, so I feel like that's justified. But we get fantastic stuff for Sokka here. Very Romeo and Juliet-esque melodramatic stuff between him and Yue, which surprisingly, thanks to these voice actors' performances, really works well. We get some great stuff for Aang. Like, I didn't even mention, in order to get the information he needs about where the moon spirit is, he has to confront, what's it called, Ko the Face Stealer or something? Which is a terrifying spirit. Like, just the existence of this one thing calls into question Korra's decision later to open up the spirit world. Because I wouldn't want this thing getting out. But I'm not going to rob you of going and watching that scene yourself if you haven't or if you've forgotten it. Because it is so tense and so good. And the voice acting is so good and the animation is so good. It's really a highlight of these episodes. And then even Iroh and Zuko get a lot here. Iroh because he finally steps up and starts to be a change in the world again by defending the spirit, even if he didn't succeed in doing so. And Zuko in showing his vulnerability and his compassion. Even if he didn't show it to anyone else, he showed it to us. And that's what matters. It also works as an effective culmination of events that we have seen so far. We see where all of Zhao's efforts have brought him, and it's terrifying, and it builds the world. We learn more about the spirits, we learn more about history, we get to see just how dangerous one of these spirits can be. Like, maybe it couldn't have been as dangerous if it wasn't projecting itself through Aang. But Aang is the Avatar. Like, what is he the Avatar of, if not this kind of thing, right? Like, is this going to happen again? Do we have to worry? Like, the answer is technically no, but it's still such an interesting question to raise. There's not much more to say about these, though. They're great, a little overstuffed, and, like, in retrospect, the plotline about Yue's betrothal probably didn't need to be here at all. Let's not kid ourselves here. It probably didn't need to be here at all. But it's still entertaining, and the episodes don't feel too overblown for it being there. So I'm not going to begrudge it being there, considering that there were some strong moments in it. Like, I'm sitting here saying that these episodes felt a little bloated, and I'm trying to think, what better culmination of this season's events could we have gotten? And I legit can't think of one. I think this is pretty much the best finale they could have written for the first season of their show. It brings so many elements together and concludes them so effectively. And, like, yeah, it does make book one of the series feel a little more capped off compared to, like, the next couple seasons where they seem to flow more directly into each other. But that's perfectly fine, because this season felt almost like a different animal from what's to come anyway. There were more self-contained episodes. The tone felt a little different. This almost feels like the prototype season for the show, whereas seasons 2 and 3 are the final produced version. Up to and including season 2 introducing the couple of final pieces to the puzzle of what makes this show so fantastic. That the first of those being Azula and her friends, and the other being the absolute best character in the entire franchise, who we will be talking about relatively soon at this point, and I am so excited about that. So, in the meantime, what do you guys think of The Siege in the North, parts 1 and 2? If you have seen them, what do you think of the first season of Avatar? Overall, do you agree with me that it feels a little uneven compared to the rest of the series, while still being quite good? Or do you have different thoughts? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.